The session will wrap with a discussion on these collective and individual efforts spread across 3 institutions addressing the critical work of preserving queer moving images. I want to mention that I use the word queer as an umbrella term to include the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual identities in an ecosystem that will continue to evolve. Yesterday's session set the stage for some unique insights into a figure largely unknown in this field. A number of the ideas piqued my interest, particularly those around the competitive role of archives, the impact of a field often focused on feature films, and the unseen labor of women. We start the story with a brief overview of the history and impact of the work of Jenni Olson, filmmaker, collector, and archivist. So let's go back to the year 1987. Jenni Olson, a young University of Minnesota film studies student, had just read Vito Russo's book, The Celluloid Closet, Homosexuality in the Movies. An avid watcher of Hollywood movies since childhood, Olson's world opened through Russo's sharp analysis of queer representation in mainstream cinema. Olson would later describe reading Russo's book as a pivotal personal and professional moment, later inspiring her career to create a queer film series at the University of Minnesota titled Lavender Images. Here they're showing Madkin in uniform. Programming for Lavender Images propelled Olson to search for 16mm elements to screen and project, a world that started her journey into film distribution and archival access. Olson would later program the Minnesota St. Paul LGBT Film Festival for many years before co-directing the San Francisco International Gay and Lesbian Film Festival in 1991, then just 14 years into its existence. Around this time, Olson began collecting, mainly through The Big Reel, an American magazine dedicated to collectors of film and television material, including film elements. Olson, then in her early 20s with limited financial resources, would mostly purchase trailers from other collectors, starting with the trailer of The Killing of Sister George. Olson remarked that she could not compete in the competitive and often pricey market of feature film prints, so she focused on materials outside of these margins. Working with dealers who would sell a range of material through The Big Reel, Olson began collecting hundreds of trailers and would later start collecting short films and other materials, which we'll hear about more later in Todd and Hayden's presentation. Olson would find footing as the co-director of the San Francisco International Lesbian and Gay Film Festival, advocating in the early 1990s for at least 50% representation of women's films. So at that time, the sorts of metrics figured less prominently in discussions, and she pushed for this before equity and inclusion were largely, known frameworks. Because films in the early 1990s skewed more towards male representation, Olson would program archival titles to reach this 50% goal. Combining her deep understanding of queer film and her growing collection of trailers, Olson would compile dozens of trailers in the program Homo Promo. She would later continue to create additional trailer reels, including one devoted to Jodie Foster and others devoted to camp. Olson's body of work would grow when in 1995 she published The Ultimate Guide to Lesbian and Gay Film and Video. That same year, she would shift her career from programming a festival to curating an online presence on the internet. Joining Planet Out in 1995, Olson would build on her work on The Ultimate Guide to create a queer film database called Popcorn Q. The site started what is likely the first ever curated online presence of queer films. In case you're wondering what a queer film website looked like in 1995, here you go. These are some fun throwbacks. For years, Popcorn Q served as an incredible resource for film programmers, including myself, and the community, providing vital information for independent queer films for research and programming. In 2001, with a new family and added responsibilities at home, Olson's collecting stopped, and she would gradually move her collection to Stephen Parr's Oddball Film and Video for some time before transitioning into an archival space. After Planet Out was bought by AOL and the site would slowly change before the dot-com boom, after the dot-com boom, Olson left in 2003 and moved to lesbian film distributor Wolf Video. So I want to just make a quick comment here. Olson and I talked kind of a lot about her experience and thinking around archives and gatekeeping and what she felt as archives looking down on collectors. And so it took a while, I think, for her to really become more interested in working with archives, including UCLA and Harvard, in part because of this distance. And so she reflected a little bit on that, and really, I'll talk a little bit more about what I think of this as a community of care, but this is kind of what we talked a lot about in our conversations. I would also say, and should mention, that I was an intern at Planet Out at Popcorn Q in 1999, and so Olson's work really influenced me to really be here too. So I would be remiss not to mention her incredible work as a filmmaker, though she has not really considered her trailer compilations part of her filmmaking practice. Also began making films in 1991. Her work would gradually focus on landscape films, particularly starting with Blue Diary, narrated by Silas Howard in 1998. In my interview with her for this panel, she remarked that her departure from collecting allowed her to make some room for her creative practice. So while shifting away from collecting, Olson's dedication to queer film would focus on curating, advocating, and intervening in ways that pushed the UCLA Film and Television Archive to advance its efforts around queer archiving. Olson was once, as I mentioned, skeptical of archives, and I use the term archivist for her because I truly believe that she is an archivist through her incredible work. She has no degree, no formal training, but because of her experiences and really pushing the archive in many ways to collect and preserve, I think of her as one. So I want to close on her impact and work, and really my presentation's hoping to set the stage for Todd and Hayden's discussions around her work within our archives. I believe that for queer individuals, myself included, culture is passed from one generation to the next, often in the form of the arts. Queer culture isn't necessarily something your parents teach you, at least mine didn't. So one particularly moving conversation between Olson and I largely centered around the idea of queer identity and the shared sense of responsibility that we both hold in seeing new life breathed into these queer heirlooms for future generations. The creation of a community and network of care can often start with a few dedicated individuals convening to address an important issue. While we spotlight in this moment Jenni's efforts, she acknowledges that this work is essentially a collective one. Olson represents to me the impact of a single person, can make in helping shift a mutual undertaking with momentum and expertise. Without advocates within the communities we serve, we can operate blindly and without intentionality. This is why we're talking about Jenni Olson, not only for her impact, but also to highlight the types of relationships that help elevate the work of archives. And to speak more on this, I hand the floor to my fantastic colleague, Todd Wiener, Motion Picture Curator at UCLA.
All right, thank you so much, May, and many thanks to the FIAF Scientific Committee for inviting me to speak about the Outfest UCLA project as part of our Queer Eye for the Archive panel. Utilizing Jenni Olson's advocacy and partnership as a through line, I will briefly talk about the history of the partnership and the collection. Outfest and the UCLA Film and Television Archive began the conversation about a formal LGBTQ collection and preservation partnership because of two synergistic occurrences. First being Outfest's vast festival screener collection of DVDs and VHS tapes that was housed in the basement of their Los Angeles Mid-City office. The building's basement flooded due to a pipe burst, and many of the festival's submissions were in jeopardy of damage. In addition to several decades of classic LGBTQ features and shorts, a good number of these submissions were titles that never received formal release or distribution. It was and continues to be an incredible research resource that was boxed away and in physical danger at the time. Concurrently, Outfest and fellow film festivals were trying to secure good quality prints of classic queer canon for retrospective screenings. For example, an anniversary screening of an important 1977 queer documentary, Word Is Out, not only revealed that the print was severely faded, but it was also missing major sections of the film. Under the guidance of then UCLA archive director Tim Kittleson and then Outfest director Stephen Gutwillig, the Legacy Project was formalized and publicly announced at the Outfest Film Festival in July of 2005. The first major project initiative was moving the approximately 4,000 festival submission tapes and DVDs to the archive, as well as photochemically preserving the films Word Is Out and Parting Glances. Almost immediately after securing the festival screener collection, UCLA began acquiring film and video collections from many LGBTQ distributors and collectors. Pictured here is a very small representation of the many Legacy Project depositors and donors over the years. A Strand Releasing was the first independent distributor to deposit prints, thanks to founder Marcus Hugh. And our first Legacy Project collection gift from a private collector was, of course, from Jenni Olson. In some cases, archive depositors like Southern California filmmaker and activist Pat Rocco, they already had collections at the archive that were symbolically moved into the Legacy Project. And given that Jenni was not able to join us in Mexico City due to a scheduling conflict, I would like to share a short segment from the oral history interview I did with her about a few of her earliest collection donations to the Legacy Project.
And that's the origins of my collection, is like, oh my God, the 1955 Mother's Day episode of the Liberace show, I have to have that on 16 millimeter. You know, and like the case of Mr. Lin, also from 1955, filmed therapy session with a gay man. Crazy. That's like one of the most incredible things I've ever found. And Queens at Heart, you know, which actually was probably the most significant thing I ever found, especially because it was something that was never written about in any kind of gay film literature. And I literally bought it based on the title, thinking that it seemed promising. And sure enough, it was.
What year did you purchase that print? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Sometime in the 90s. I do remember that it was 35. Mm-hmm. And the only way I was able to look at 35 stuff was to go to my friend who was a projectionist at the Roxy and be like, okay, can we look at stuff after, you know, at like midnight after the theater closed? And so I had that print for like I want to say like 2 years before I even watched it. On the one hand, it was not in great shape, especially when you look at the like before and after. Like, yeah. On the other hand, it was not, you know, it was not terrible. But oh my God, I remember that night, like, you know, putting it up and thinking like, oh, it could, you know, it's probably nothing. It's probably, you know, oh, I wasted my money on some like beauty pageant, you know, straight women beauty pageant thing. And then it came up, you know, and just like, I just was sitting there the whole time going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
It's truly amazing. And it's got such a life now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so important. I mean, look what this country is dealing with right now. It's so important. And thank you so much for finding that film.
It is the most significant thing and it was the first donation to the Legacy Project. The things I'm most proud of is the 1971 Christopher Street Day parade footage from Cape Millet. You know, that, like, God, you know, that was like one of the most exciting moments of my life. I'm like, the birth of my children and being in Susan Kleckner's storage locker and being like, what's this? Like, that says 1971 Christopher Street Day parade footage on it and is like literally like the negative. And her being like, oh yeah, that's right, we shot that.
And like, by the NFPF and now out there in the world.
Yeah. And, you know, so important, like the second gay pride parade. It's incredible. Shot by women, the Women's Liberation Film Collective, so that there's footage of lesbians instead of it being just gay men, because it's all shot by gay men. No, offense.
As you just saw, Jenni's passionate commitment and contributions to the Legacy Project are an example of how the Legacy Project collection grew so quickly and engaged so many other community partners. In addition to the films and filmmakers she just mentioned, Jenni's curatorial support allowed us to acquire the film collections of more off-the-grid women filmmakers such as Sophie Constantinou, Nancy Cates, Pam Walton, and Ingrid Wilhite. As FIAF celebrates women's cinema and film archives in this symposium, I would like to take a moment to expand on Jenni Olson's dedication and care for LGBTQ moving images to celebrate all of these incredible women and gender non-conforming individuals pictured here. All of these passionate archivists, programmers, filmmakers, and activists were Outfest UCLA Legacy Project managers and/or served on the Legacy Project Board of Advisors. Their advocacy and outreach is why this collection now contains over 42,000 holdings in under 20 years. This group's dedication to preservation helps support the current 28 formal restoration efforts that were completed as part of this initiative. These preservation efforts were made possible by partnerships and combined resources from the likes of the Academy, Frameline, Indie Collect, and the Sundance Institute. Their ongoing work also inspired and supported colleague institutions to re-examine and cultivate their LGBTQ collections and queer preservation programs. Oops, I skipped ahead. As we built the Legacy Project collection with our Outfest colleagues and the LGBTQ community, Outfest UCLA accepted many significant collections, some which are represented on this slide. There were many donated collections like the In the Life television show and the Strand Releasing Circulating Print collection, to name a few. However, most of the project's collections were placed on deposit, and this included Jenni Olson's personal collection, which is separate from her early Legacy Project donations, as well as filmmakers Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman's Telling Pictures collection. Unbeknownst to UCLA and our Outfest colleagues at the time, these depositors desired to seek out institutional funders that could purchase their collections. And in 2015, the Telling Pictures paper and media collection was sold to Stanford University. Stanford was fine leaving the approximately 4,500 film reels and videotapes at UCLA as part of the Legacy Project, and they just signed a new deposit agreement with us for the formal provenance. At the end of 2019, the Harvard Film Archive purchased Jenni Olson's personal papers and moving image collection. And Jenni was incredibly heartbroken to break the news to us after her almost 15-year relationship with the Legacy Project, and I remember her emotional call like it was yesterday. But the recent movement of Jenni's collection to Harvard has now opened the door for a more engaged and collaborative relationship for UCLA and Harvard that we are excited to explore, and I think Hayden and May would like to address that after the panels. Collaboration and the pooling of resources is also a conversation we look forward to having with all of our Legacy Project depositor institutions like the One Archives at USC, as well as Stanford, but also with the broader FIAF community. For this reason, we were particularly thrilled to be paired with Sanche at the Thai Film Archive for this panel. Jenni still continues to be a major catalyst for our collection growth and continued engagement with the queer filmmaker community. One of her most recent and ambitious archival projects is the Bresson Project, which is devoted to the preservation and promotion of the films of Arthur J. Bresson Jr., who passed away from AIDS-related complications at the age of 44. Launched in 2018 by Arthur's sister Ro Bresson and Jenni, the project has located many of Bresson's thought to be lost negative imprints, which are now archived at UCLA. In addition to the UCLA restorations of Bresson's important LGBTQ documentaries Coming Out and Gay USA, Most of Bresson's early erotica films have been recently scanned and remastered as part of these efforts and are now being released through boutique distributors. And as many of our FIAF colleague institutions are aware, securing resources for the scanning and preservation of pornographic moving images is quite the challenge. And I was particularly excited to see the Activating the Eros film collection in the earlier panel today. In closing, I would like to thank all of the UCLA Archive and Outfest staff members who have supported the Legacy Project over the years. This work for all of us has been hugely rewarding on many levels, but most particularly in the way it has lifted and preserved the untold stories and undiscovered stories of the LGBTQ+ communities represented in the collection. In the United States and elsewhere in the world, there has been an alarming recent political trends around the erasure of trans and queer voices. Before I turn the panel over to Hayden Guest, I would like to show you a portion of a recent See the Bigger Picture promotional piece that the archive has just produced, and it focuses on the Legacy Project's impact and importance as it relates to one of our filmmaker colleagues and her work.
How have the female hormones affected you physically?
People think LSD is a trip. They should try taking hormones.
I'm Zachary Drucker. I am a filmmaker and an artist. I created a series called The Lady in the Dale about Geraldine Elizabeth Carmichael. She was a very elusive figure. She had changed her gender and her name. There was no ephemera from her, nothing that we could find. All that really existed was mostly housed here at the UCLA Film and Television Archive. Without the archive, the series really would not have been possible. We didn't have much footage of her, but we did have Behind Every Good Man. We did have Queens at Heart. We could use these other representations of transness from the 60s and 70s to create a fuller picture of our protagonist. There are so few renderings of transgender life through history that oftentimes we rely on cinematic representations to find ourselves. The thing that I'm most excited about is how much is still out there that's yet to be found. In 2010, I shot a film called At Least You Know You Exist, which I made with an elder legend, Alice Sabrina. After living with this footage in my closet for years, I deposited the film to the UCLA Film and Television Archive, and they graciously digitized the film, restored it. It's such a deep honor to have your work acquired by the archive. With trans people at the center of a culture war, there's a tremendous amount of comfort in knowing that even if your bodily autonomy or your life is somehow compromised by the state, that what you create can continue to live and impact people into the future.
Thank you very much, and please take it away, Hayden Guest. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Todd and May, for these wonderful presentations on Jenni Olson. I want to give special thanks to the FIAF Scientific Committee for inviting us to participate in this thought-provoking symposium. Now, as Todd mentioned, the Harvard Film Archive is a repository of the large and remarkable collection of 35mm, 16mm Super 8 prints patiently gathered by filmmaker, activist, and archivist Jenni Olson over the many years of her multifaceted career. Now, this is more than just a significant film collection. I would say this acquisition also serves as a kind of corrective framework or optic that we are using to reconsider practices for acquisition, preservation, and access in terms of queer cinema. In the context of this symposium, Olson's work as a collector offers an important example of an intervention that looks generatively beyond static binary definitions of gender to better engage the diversity of LGBTQ experiences, both historically and in the present moment. This seems especially urgent today as we've heard, as you know, the rights and identity of non-binary people are being systematically and insidiously challenged in the US and elsewhere. I would like to argue that precisely this kind of intervention, as is embodied by Jenni Olson in her collections, should accompany and amplify the kinds of work that have been described by so many of the presentations in the symposium to push back against patriarchal structures that have for so long been used to limit and delegitimize women and their vital work, both in cinema and in the film archive. The same patriarchy, after all, as well as the binary definition of gender that is its natural extension, can also serve to limit and delegitimize the vital work done by LGBTQ archivists and activists. Jenni Olson's pioneering career as a collector, preservationist, and archivist is exemplary in this regard, as is, I should add, the work being done by UCLA and, as we'll hear, by the Thai Film Archive. Now, the acquisition of the Jenni Olson collection, was, as you can see, celebrated when it came to Harvard in 2020. And I want to just add that to be more specific, how it came, it was my colleague Amy Sloper, who I really want to credit, who oversaw the archives. She oversees our preservation research programs, and she was largely responsible for shepherding this important acquisition. Now, while Jenni has had a long, important, extremely fruitful, and continuing relationship with UCLA, as described by May and Todd, she's also continued to work with different archives and libraries in order to strategically maximize institutional resources to advance the collections and projects she champions. Most recently, for example, she brought the papers of Arthur Bresson to Cornell University, where they're now available for researchers and scholars. I'm struck by the comments that Guadalupe Ferrer made at the beginning of this symposium, speaking about the importance of cultivating sort of a non-competitive spirit and relationships between archives. And I'd like to say that I think that Jenni's work has done exactly that, as testified by our presence here sharing this panel and this exploring Jenni's work from different and really productive angles. Now, in the case of Harvard, what interested Jenni especially was the constellation of materials within our collections and within the collections of the Harvard Library, of which the HFA is a division. Collections that speak directly to our own work. Especially important here were the films and papers of pioneering San Francisco-based queer filmmakers, Warren Sombert and George Kuchar. Olson's work with trailers, and I would say that these are films unto themselves, perhaps a topic for the upcoming symposium looking at archives begetting films, and because she provocatively reanimated these trailers by building them into larger, playfully and provocatively thematic reels, such as Homo Promo, such as Trailer Camp, and such as this wonderful a trailer show that traces queer icon Jodie Foster's rise as a Hollywood star. But trailers were only part of Olson's larger curatorial project that came to encompass educational films, television films, commercials, after-school specials, industrial films, home movies, and pornography. Before my arrival to Harvard, now 15 years ago, the HFA was moved administratively to the Harvard Library, the world's largest university research library, an institution whose workforce and leadership is comprised of more than 70% women. While the Harvard Library has a long and illustrious history of building collections focused on women, with a major library indeed, Schlesinger, dedicated to that very purpose, I see the place of the Jenni Olson collection within the system is inviting us as an institution to define and maintain a more generatively expansive understanding of queer cinema that can help guide wider collection cataloging and exhibition strategies. Now, the Jenni Olson film collection is not a static entity, but is instead what I like to call an open collection, meaning that it will continue to grow both through the acquisition of new collections and through the cross-listing of associated films and other holdings. Indeed, we will continue working with Olson to actively locate and acquire films that complement her work, especially in the realms of avant-garde cinema and home movies. And Olson will continue to be an active curatorial presence at the HFA, beginning with a visit next year to curate and present a wide-ranging program drawing from her collection, And in the meantime, she's curated an online collection of queer film posters from her collection, also at HFA, that can be viewed on our website. I'm really looking forward to, we made time so we can have a short conversation amongst the four of us to discuss the shaping presence of Jenni Olson as an activist, archivist, and collector. But in the meantime, I want to turn the microphone over to Sanche Chotirosirani, and so he can talk about the remarkable work that he has been doing and his institution has been doing. And so I please turn the microphone to him.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for my family name.
Never apologize.
It's always a problem every time, everywhere. So, yes, before presenting, I would like to express my appreciation to the FIAF Scientific Committee to give me a chance to present in the FIAF, and extend my gratitude to my wonderful co-panelists, May, Todd, and Harden, to allow my presentation to be aligned with the concept of queer eye for the archive. During past month, I need to confess that I was a bit confused, not confused, but curious, like how I can relate my presentation to Jenni Olson's work. You know, it's like very different. But listening my presentation, I was stunned because I just know that Jenni make a film, documentary film, Homo Promo. This film, and along with the celluloid closet, inspired me to do this research. Yeah, and it's surprisingly because, you know, if you have a chance to look at these two films, they talk about the early cinema, queer cinema in America. And I thought like, oh, why not we have that kind of stuff in Thailand? So that's why it inspired me to do that. Surprisingly, so Jenni's legacy not only influenced in America, but also a Thai activist. Okay. My presentation, as I told you, the main reason I conducted the research was the widespread belief that the first Thai film having a queer protagonist character is The Last Song, 1985. This belief was contrary to the fact that there were many queer characters in Thai film before 1985. I believe that this misconception was due to a lack of historical research on Thai cinema and limited availability of the old Thai film. As someone who has a convenient access to the Thai film archive collection, I took the opportunity to delve into the archive film and film-related materials. My research aimed to fill the gap in the history of Thai queer cinema by creating a database of Thai film before 1985 that feature queer characters and or queer sensibility, which has never been explored before. To begin with, I compiled a list of early Thai queer films based on my own memory of films that I have watched. Through my research, I uncovered some interesting cases that I would like to share with you. Okay. One such example is the trick cinematograph in 1927 and 1930, a film by a Thai amateur filmmaker, Prince of Kampang Phet, who experimented with the early movie camera to present film trick. In one scene, he swaps a female dancing body with a male head as a part of his optical illusion experiment. This is going to be the first Thai film to depict the gender crossing in the early cinema period. The practice of gender crossing or having a character in disguise as opposite sex was common in the Thai cinema, as seen in the Forever Yours in 1955, a romantic drama that is a brief comic shot where a famous Thai comedian Law Tok dressed up as a woman with his mustache intact to seduce a male character. It is worth noting that although the male character seemed appear at first, he later tries to kill the cross-dressing character, who in turn tries to get away from him. While male-to-female cross-dressing was mostly used for comic relief, the practice of female-to-male cross-dressing often led to the dramatic turn in early Thai cinema, such as in Mountain Tiger in 1979, the leading female character disguised herself as a man to take a revenge for her father. Next, I want to share you with the first Thai film that having the leading characters as a transgender. Is this a Kathoi Pen Head or because of the transgender? This 12-minute silent black and white comedy was made by Charlie Simpli in 1954. Charlene was an amateur filmmaker who worked a full-time as a banker. Because of transgender, it's actually a comedy through the very first intertitle informed the audience that it is a great tragedy. The story concerns a group of men fighting over the beautiful woman before they find out later that in the film that she is in fact a female transgender. This leads to the tragic ending of the male characters but bring much laughter to its audience. Because of the transgender is therefore the oldest Thai film with a focus on transgender character collected at the Thai Film Archive by far that reveal the social perception and the position of the female transgender in Thai society. Transgender character is not new to Thai film. In 1955, Poor Millionaire, the first Thai film to win Best Picture at Phra Surasawadi Award, featured a transgender bar with the transgender showgirls entertaining clients. It's quite amazing to see that. In 1971, a comedy film, Dreamy Marriage, a housekeeper character is a transgender, played by Subin Sawangrat, a famous actor who was typically cast as a macho antagonist. The character dressed and acts like a woman, but with a fully formed mustache, creating a comic contradiction. The film also cast a real-life transgender and very famous at that time, Ratchanok Na Chiang Mai in the middle of the picture, to play an unnamed transgender. In the film, the male protagonist pretends to get intimate with the transgender character to make his wife jealous. To get revenge, the wife has a male transgender character played by a famous actress, Julie Osley, dressed up in a man's suit and mustache and flirts with her. The use of the effeminate and masculine transgender serves as a plot point to restore the heterosexual relationship between the lead couple of the film. Another popular queer theme in Thai cinema is a gender confusion. For instance, in the 1976 film Kung Nang, the female protagonist has been raised as a boy, leading to play a gender and sexuality. She sees herself as a male until she met the male lead, who collect her gender identity and restore her to normative heterosexual femininity. Similarly, in Good Morning Teacher 1978, the gender binary is blurred as a female character is a tomboy and the male character is a sissy gay. However, the film ultimately re-established heteronormativity by having the two characters fall in love in the end, fall in love each other. While this movie may seem to celebrate sexual fluidity, they also convey the message that queer desires are unnatural and can be corrected. The same production company went on to make another film with similar storyline, Crazy Love Student, in 1985. The film sent out a strong message that it is the parents' direct responsibility to give correct advice to children to prevent them from becoming homosexuals. The film showed that with the right upbringing and care, children who lose their way and become homosexual can return to the correct path. A lesbian character who does not receive such a correct guidance becomes mentally ill in the end. The ending of the film presents a didactic moment to the audience that parents must take good care of their children to prevent them from being homosexual. So that's what in the end of the movie. Another category of the queer representation of Thai film portrays a non-heterosexual character as evil, deviant, and dangerous, which become more common in the film after 1970s. For example, The Wife Eater, 1924, a queer character falls in love with his own nephew. Whenever the nephew gets married, he poisons and kills his wife. Being a homosexual here is not associated with the incest and violence. The character nonetheless expresses heterosexual desire in the scene showing him having sex with a woman. The film interestingly suggests that the woman take the active sexual role. We see her wearing mustache, and she claimed herself that she was his husband. The disturbing nature of the scene is compounded by the display of drug abuse and unusual pornographic picture in the room. His sexual fluidity is not that progressively represented, but on the other hand, it still becomes an element emphasizing that his deviant characteristic. Female homosexual characters were also portrayed as deviant and violent in several films from that period. Very Hard, for example, in 1977, a female English tutor has a secret relationship with her lonely female student. She finds out later that the student is having an affair with her sister boyfriend. The teacher shoots both of them dead and turns the gun to herself. Apart from my personal recollection of the movie that I have watched, the Thai Film Archive, Thai filmography is an invaluable source of information for my research. Our team of researchers collect data on Thai film released in cinema since 1927 from film booklets, magazines, and newspapers. This is particularly useful since many early Thai films have been lost or forgotten. So at this point, I would like to acknowledge the unsung and hard work of the catalogers in every film archive around the world, that they work really hard, and that's why we can have a chance to have our database and information to make research and make presentation here today. One interesting thing and surprising point that I found from the Thai filmography is in 1960s, the term "kathoy" in Thai means effeminate, gay, or transgender. It's not necessarily related to homosexual desire. Later, the term signifies behavioral pattern considered incompatible with the norm of gender binary, namely normative masculine men or normatively feminine women. We can see the hint of sexual fluidity of the kathoy character, who display effeminate mannerism while also having heterosexual desire. For example, in 1964, two action movies, The Great Nine and The City Lion, have their main character, male character, played by Michai Bancha and Sombat Methani. They're both very famous and really macho guy, and in the plot that appear in the film booklet, they said that the character needs to dress up and disguise as a kathoy or effeminate gay man to solve the criminal cases. In Loyal Lotus in 1968 has a kathoy character who make a woman pregnant. So to use the word kathoy is quite interesting in that period. I mean, totally different from the nowadays. Apart from the Thai filmography, film posters also serve as the valuable sources of the information. They reveal how queer elements were marketed in film. Miss Dautiam in 1960 showed male character in woman clothing in the poster. Dim Light in the middle has a heroine disguised as a man to enter to nightclub and kill her enemy, as depicted in the poster. And the last one, the poster of Sensational Gap in 1976, highlight the image of male teacher sexually touching his male student in film poster. My research has resulted in temporary exhibition on queer character in early Thai cinema that to be held in coming June during a Pride Month this year, and daily screening program that focus on queer Thai cinema. And my colleague has also digitized some interesting queer titles, including Sensation Gap, which had never been released in the digital format before. Furthermore, I also collaborated with the film lecturer Atit Pongpanit to write a book chapter based on my research, which will be published later of this year. And most of my presentation script today come from that book chapter. So in conclusion, my research into the Thai film archive collection has revealed a wealth of queer representation in early Thai cinema that was previously overlooked. By continuing to explore and analyze this film, we can gain a deeper understanding of the history of Thai queer cinema and its impact on contemporary culture, and also its reflect the film archive, research, and curatorial contribution to the society as well. Thank you so much for your attention.
Great. So we streamlined our respective presentations in order to give some time for us to first have a conversation up here on stage, and then and to give you time to formulate your own questions. And so I wanted to begin by asking us a sort of general, hopefully generative question that can allow us to reflect on the work that we do in our three different institutions. And May, you brought up this term, communities of care, which I thought was so important to have and to recognize as a kind of aspiration, right, for ourselves as archivists and as part of larger institutional communities, especially as we work with collections that at times highly sensitive. I'd noticed how, I was really struck how both in Jenni Olson's collection and the collections you're dealing with, there's also, you're looking at both progressive and regressive, images of LGBTQ communities and experiences. But then I'm also just thinking about how one in general thinks about collecting, about collections of which, coming from communities of which one may not necessarily be fully a part of. And so I was wondering if we could maybe talk about this. What sort of what approaches and strategies and things do we keep in mind as we aspire to be part of a larger community of care?
So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, I kind of use that term thinking about Michelle Caswell and Marika Seafor's article around feminist, sort of ethics of care, and thinking about radical empathy within film archives or within archives, and then, thinking about how that applies to film archives. For UCLA, I think what's interesting is Jenni's initial experience of working with an archive was actually through a film festival, queer film festival, Outfest, which we've mentioned, right? And so it wasn't necessarily through our own institutional history and whatnot that she was drawn to collaborating with us. It was that Outfest and UCLA created a project around queer film preservation. And so I think that's really her entryway into this institution. I struggle with this a lot because I think that there's questions around how much institutions themselves can really carry some of this work and how much we should. And there's obviously histories where we haven't participated well within the communities that we work within to represent those collections, to outreach, to do that work. And so when I say intentionality, I think a lot about what we actually have capacity to do. And I think part of working, across other organizations and institutions is to really just acknowledge that there is not one archive that can manage, this kind of collection. There's not one person, there's not one archivist. It's really about that, but also building in collaboration. Like, I'm a queer woman of color, but that doesn't mean I know everything about the collection. In fact, I definitely don't, and like Todd knows a lot, other folks, Jenni. And so for us, it's really about knowing what we don't know. And I think that's important. So I don't know if I'm fully answering your question.
No, absolutely. But I would emphasize, and I think this would be a good segue to also entry point for Sanche, but I think as we're both university archives, and I think that gives us a certain position that allows for a bit more latitude in recognizing what we do not know and reaching out to work with others who do. And again, even there, the importance of recognize those limitations too. But I'm thinking, what you were saying though about recognizing recognizing the certain things that there's certain limit points. And I'm also, there's real sensitivity now in terms of how, collections are presented, how access is given, how collections are described and cataloged. And I feel like all of this, we're entering a time which I think is really wonderful and important, but it's made our work even more difficult in a way, by necessity.
So I should mention, and I would really love Sanchai to also chime in on this question about working with communities, is that there is an initiative right now called In Frame, and it's about, started at the Academy, and it's really a consortium of different archives thinking about this issue around how to describe marginalized and underrepresented communities. It's very American focused right now, and so we could always talk about it more at the SINAFA meeting, but those are really interesting questions, right? So looking at, say, Vito Russo's book, in that process we realized that the language with which he describes, a film is antiquated in some ways as relation to how we think about it. Somebody may say transsexual at a time and now it's different, and so these ideas around description as this community evolves is ever changing, and there's Homosaurus and other different types of organizations addressing this within their own sort of body of work. So I would say that it's invigorating to think that we can have these conversations, and also like a deep responsibility to actually do that work.
Right, humbling in a way. Yeah, but then in the case of the Thai Film Archive, you are in fact one institution entrusted with this responsibility of national film heritage. And I was wondering if you could speak then about how this idea of engagement through care is actualized or aspired to.
I have to say that the situation in Thailand is quite different from the US, that we don't have many film researchers much. So that's why we need to do our own research, and do our own database, things like that, and hope that one day maybe might have someone who interested in this kind of stuff and come to use our database, things like that. And about the care and collection thing, I have to say that many early queer film, like a last song, that the film that people believe that the first queer movie that in 1985, we don't have any copy left. There's only very bad video digital file, and that also happened with many films in 1980s in Thailand. So that comes me quite ring the bell that if we don't do this kind of stuff, one day they might be gone and people might forget about that. So that the link between why the research or do some this historical research is really important, and database is important, and we also use the photo poster and everything to make it alive, even we may not have the good copy anymore. Yeah, I don't know that answer your question. Yeah.
I guess my question would also be have you ever worked with, for the archive, we don't really have a lot of female collectors who we've worked with, like Jenni. I think Jenni's pronouns are TBD, is what she says, and so, but she's consented to using she, her. But so I guess I would wonder is the network of collectors that you might work with who might have material, or folks who might be knowledgeable, like the Queer Film Festival, how do you interact with those particular entities to kind of build the collection that you're looking to build, right, and to seek this material?
Yeah. We don't have, even we are the heaven of queer, Asian queer, we don't have the LGBT film festival in Thailand. We used to have it, and then they just have 2 years and then they stop.
Wow.
So the private collector, that's another issue that, like you said that you're lucky that Jenni not compatible with the archive, but for Thai film, Thailand, I know that there are some private collectors that they do some, their own, and they quite, and that quite tricky to work with them as well. Now, we working with some outdoor screening. They have the film unit that they have many print, and we hope that one day we will gather some print from that kind of the commercial space and commercial outdoor screening, and also we work with the company mostly, to ask them to donate the film to us. But for the old title, it's very, very difficult. Unless that now we look at the archive in abroad, and we found some Thai title, surprisingly. And actually the last song in 1985 is quite phenomenal at that time. So if we have news that, they might show in some country, yeah, that might be one source that we can tracking that, oh, maybe they might have better copy than just the video file. Yeah, so that stuff.
It's interesting you bring up sort of collaborating with other film archives. After this session, we're going to arm wrestle over who gets Jenni Olson's personal collection. That's a joke. I'm going to lose. But what I will say is like something that came up around this conversation, we were thinking about this panel was, Todd's idea was, let's talk about Jenni. And I said, well, we have to definitely work with Hayden and bring in Harvard. And part of this is kind of the messy thing, which is that UCLA cannot afford necessarily to acquire collections. We are a large, public university, and we don't have an acquisitions budget. And I'm sure there are many other archives, smaller community-based archives that don't. And so there is a tension there, and I was saying to Hayden, I was like, I'm gonna bring this up, we're gonna talk about it. Because to me, it's interesting that we're on stage, we're talking about it, but it is a challenging thing. And one of the things particularly rooted in this particular instance and in other ones is that these independent filmmakers, women, folks who didn't have a lot of resources, need to find a home and also need resources. Jenni had a family, kids to put through college. And so her view of it was really like, as much as, I love working with UCLA, I needed to find a home, but not just any home, a good home that, could also support me as an individual and as a filmmaker. And so who are we to tell Jenni Olson how to resource her life, right? And so I think that's something that's an interesting thing to tie in with some of the competition discussion earlier yesterday, and also the sort of economics and patriarchy that we're in. So I don't know, Hayden, if you want to reflect a bit on that. And then I think we should probably open it up to the floor.
Sure. No, I think thank you, May, for raising an uncomfortable question. No. No, but really, I think it's really important for us, for institutions with real resources, in terms of acquisitions, it's important, I think, to really have this, again, to think differently and think collaboratively. In the case of UCLA, which I should point out, I'm a graduate and care deeply about. I see a balance is between, in terms of film preservation itself. As we've seen, UCLA is a powerhouse, and I see collaboration here as being really a great strength and potential. We will be acquiring the new restoration of Queen's Heart, for instance, to add to our collection. But so I think there's real potential to actually acquire, preserve collections, and to do so in a way that's really sensitive and intentional in terms of collaboration. And I think I see this as one just really great example.
I'll say one happy thing out of a very unfortunate situation is we found out about the transfer of Jenni's collection to Harvard, and then the world shut down because of COVID-19, and we were able to scan, thanks to our digital lab in-house and some grant funding where we could use third-party vendors, we were able to scan a great deal of Jenni's collection before it was turned over to Harvard. So a lot of the titles were able to stay on the Legacy Project kind of symbolically.
Can I add something? Because as May talk about the young queer cinema, like the young queer filmmaker, the film archive, the Thai Film Archive, we organized a Thai Short Film Festival. This year going to be our 27, so 27 years already. That quite like a strategy to collect all of the short film that submit to us, and many of them is really good queer film actually. And that one of strategy because we just realized that the young filmmaker, they never care about their file, right? When they submit the film, then my computer or just has that, and then it's gone, and they're gone. So as an archive, we become like that resource, the backup resource that they can come and acquire the film. So in that might be one of strategy that we can collect the young filmmaker work, or queer film work as well.
It's really interesting. And I think it's maybe time to open it up to questions. I just want to say one quick thing. I actually interned under Todd on the Legacy Project many, many years ago. And I think it's important to mention that a lot of these initiatives, a lot of this work is also within the archives. And so like folks like Todd and Sanche and Hayden, and Amy, Sloper, make it happen. So it's really humbling to be on this stage with you all. So we'll open it up and hands.
I see Cecilia's here in the microphone here in this second piece. Okay.
Thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed all your presentations. I didn't know Jenni Olson, and what a discovery. So looking forward to possibly screening some of these films. We've been talking, for the past 2 days. There are words that are coming back that really resonate with our, in particular, my area of interest, but a lot of us are interested about expanding our vision, our point of views, expanding, try to bring back whatever has been marginal in the last 30, 40, 50 years at the center of a new narrative, and there's so much to bring at the center of this new narrative. We've been talking a lot about changing the optics, changing our approach in various areas. So I have one main question, which is really been bugging me for a year or two now. I wanted to hear your opinion on how you think, what is our responsibility with our awareness, current awareness. How can we combine this new effort, this collective efforts of bringing back and putting really at the center of a new narrative, everything is marginal regardless of what kind of marginality we're talking about. And at the same time, making sure that what has been the patriarchal history of cinema that we have behind, that we've been preserving, that we've been screening, gets problematized without being erased. How do we combine these two efforts as programmers, as curators? If we put up history of cinema, if we talk to children, new generations of viewers, my son is almost 11, and he watched Women Prefer Blondes a couple of weeks ago with some friends. And I wasn't watching, I was just listening. And I was being tortured because they were laughing, and at the end of the film I had to go there and make a little lecture about things that they've heard. So the other two kids were 8. They were looking at me with big eyes, like, what is she talking about? Like I was saying, like, it's women, it says here, women, want to get married and they want diamonds, and men just need to have money. I'm like, oh my God, what are they watching? What are they watching? But it's something
Gentlemen
think,
prefer blondes. Right?
Sorry, what did I say?
I was wondering if this was a queer version.
What was I saying? Women prefer.
I was like, whoa.
I'd watch that. Sorry. Let's go back to your question.
So this is a Freudian lapsus, obviously. So I'm just, it's just something really present. Are we not showing Buster Keaton because it's some racist joke or the language? Are we not watching Hitchcock because it's all male and everything we know and the male gaze and everything? What are we doing? How are we making sure that that big, very relevant part of our film history is still out there with all the choices we want to make, of course, as programmers? How do we make sure that it doesn't get erased? How do we combine those two efforts? And do you agree with what I've been saying? Anyway. I have and then I have a second question.
Well, let's do the first question.
Sure.
There's a lot, and then we'll go to the second question. But what's so humbling and important to recognize as film archivists, as historians, as lovers of cinema, is how infinite film history is. It's truly infinite, and there's always room for discoveries that correct and change the path of film history, making it even more complicated and nuanced and at times difficult. And it's not that there's just a limited space and one thing cancels out another. It's just that it's constantly expanding and becoming more complicated. Learning how to navigate that, how to teach that, that's our work, and it always has been. And I feel that, what we're also seeing now is just, we're discovering cinema in different places. We're working now actively with activists, archivists and collectors. So that's, so that's just expanding our horizons in a positive and a generative way. And so, again, it's not that there's a programmatic, curriculum that says like, oh, okay, if you have Jenni Olson, you can't have John Ford, you can't, you have to find a way to navigate that. And so someone who teaches film history within the university, this is something we think about all the time as we design our syllabus. As somebody who is a programmer and a curator of a collection, those are decisions that we're making. So how, and so it's just makes our work even more challenging and I think exciting. So.
Sorry, but you feel it's expanding, so you don't feel it's happening, that there's no erasing.
No.
In your world, yes, I'm sure it's expanding, but around us, it is erasing, I think.
I don't see that happening from where I sit, I have to be honest with you. In terms of being an institution where we're able to do a cycle of Hitchcock silent films, then a cycle of Kinyo Tanaka, then a cycle of, films by South Korean, feminist collectives in the 70s. I mean, those are complementary programs that we want to present at the same time, and it's not one over another. They're being presented in a non-hierarchical fashion. What's important, and it has to guide all of them, is that there's a real argument and there's a description that explains the context of the films, that gives it, but also explains why you're showing them, why you're collecting them, why you're preserving them, and which is something I think we tried to do here. So I don't think it's a limit. I don't think it's a either-or situation. I really don't, and I think going down that way, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but it could create this kind of reactionary sort of backlash thing, which if anything, I think what Jenni Olson's example does, and I think what Sanchai's research was, is the ways in which it allows us to re-engage cinema of the past too, and to see it, that also different. I mean, the trailer programs, your examination using this sort of queer eye, if you will, to cut across Thai film history, those are generative, and I think, again, ways to expand film history. That I think makes our work, I really think, even more exciting, and I think it can make the experience of the public's, the audience that we want to communicate with and cultivate. Actually can make it even more inclusive and meaningful for them.
Forgive me. I think I misphrased my question. I completely agree with you. In our job and in your institution, this is just richness, and the more we find, the more we present, is the more enriching. So I don't see any dichotomy per se myself. I see in various manifestations of presenting the history of cinema, I have seen this dichotomy. So my question was, how do you think the dichotomy can be avoided? Let me make a very practical example. If you look into the whole Western genre, the Western genre exists. And unfortunately now we know so much articulation about the way the natives were represented, and we are aware of that, and we can teach in universities and school and so on and so forth. But we cannot remove the Western genre to represent the culture of the natives, because in that time period, that's what film was producing.
But again, I get that. I think that's just putting ourselves into a corner. If we look at something like the Western, I think, can be seen from so many different points of view that I do think is generative, and with issues of territory, land, race, all these violence, these are all baked into there. But there's also ways that there's still a lot we can learn from there. I mean, honestly, you should, Jenni Olson, again, bring her up. She made a film called The Royal Road, which is this incredible landscape film which explores the kind of layers of the American West, if you will. There's an aspect of the film, and this is a bit of a stretch, but there's almost a little bit of the Western in there in a way, in terms of reading meaning into landscape and the monumentality of landscape. But I just pushing back against this idea that one thing has to give way to another, because I think that it doesn't mean that the Western is canceled as a genre or as something that we can't preserve or collect, or, you know, because times have changed. I don't think I wouldn't, for one, would refuse to go there and would actually refute that that is what we're seeing today, at least within the archive.
I just want to say real quick, I think the word erasure I find for some reason a little bit challenging, because I think these stories are out there. You know, I can turn on Paramount Plus, I can do a lot of things and see a lot of films that aren't represented in the archives collection, that aren't being preserved, that aren't being shared, that aren't being contextualized. So my goal as director of the UCLA Film and Television Archive is to honor and acknowledge, obviously, the tremendous rich histories in Hollywood, but also, give space for these other conversations. So it's not to cancel, it's not to erase. In fact, I think, there are arguments to be made that there's been systematic erasure in other ways, right? And so for me, I think it's not either or, it's not a dichotomy, as you're saying, but really something that we have to really consider. We have 500,000 items in our collection, and we can't always play favorites. I mean, this is just one part of what we do. So I'd love to hear your second question, but I also want to make sure we have space for...
No, I want to ask a second question. This was already...
I was wondering if, Sanjay, did you want to say anything in response to that?
Yeah. It's really interesting idea, Cecilia, and I also think about that when we do programming of the Thai queer cinema that's going to happen in June and July, from 400 titles that we have in our database. We thought like, okay, how we can present it and how we can present that, know that this is what the queer represent in Thai cinema. So we decided to do, okay, we have the queer mainstream, which is, some movie is very homophobia. Like very, very bad representation of queer characters. But we also have queer independent and queer filmmaker. So they balance that. So that's kind of thing that we want to present that, that what the world is, the society is. They believe, they see what they see and how we can present it. We don't want to just, because one of my colleagues just said, oh, why don't we show only the positive image of queer character? I said, no, that's totally wrong. That might the bubble is totally wrong, because in the end, you have to accept the reality. And one of example that I found that, the movie Cruising, 1980, Cruising, right, or Basic Instinct, when they released, they got a lot of, provoking and demonstration, against the film. But now it's become the queer cult. The queer audience love to watch that kind of stuff, even the film is so homophobia. So that means they have a lot of idea, a lot of concept, allow this kind of collection that we can present it, we know how to present it, and we should, present it in the end, right? So that, and one of my comments that I got from my lecturer in a long time ago, he said that, okay, you are a film academic, you're not film activist. It's different. When you do the film academic, you have to analyze the film as it is, but you are not activists like, oh, this film is so bad, you have to cancel it. No, that's not your job. That's what my film lecturer taught me about that.
I think we have about 7 minutes right now, so I want to make sure we have, I see a question in the light green in the back middle. Big arms. Arika?
Hi, Arika from the British Film Institute. Thank you so much for this panel. I really appreciate it to see trans women represented in the Women and Film Archives Symposium. So my question is about the urgency. It's really amazing to see the footage of the second Gay Pride March, including lesbians, and really amazing to see from the Thai Film Archive the posters and the research that you've been able to do, and I recognize that some of that is because the moving image itself may have become lost. So there's an element of urgency across all of our situations, right? The urgency of the generations being lost, the urgency of the moving image materials themselves being lost. So I wondered if the panel could reflect on any urgent actions that we can all be thinking about in our different situations. Thank you.
It's an interesting question because I think oftentimes when I go to a queer film series, I think of all the things that existed that weren't documented, home movies that didn't have a moment in that room that, you know, existed. There's a lot of loss, I think, there, thinking about what could exist but maybe doesn't or is out there and we can't find it. I guess my call to action would really be for folks to reach out to within the community organizations that you that are localized for you, right? Your queer film festival, your queer, you know, historical society, you know, folks within the community. There are queer archives, depending on your where you are, and see if there is a possible collaboration there. That would be probably my best suggestion, because, you know, as Jenni Olson has said, she's just one person, but really represents, I think she represents more than that. I don't know if anyone else wants to kind of reflect on that as we are close to the end of our panel. But that would be what my thought would be. Or go to gay pride parades and, you know, start a booth, but that's probably not gonna work. But I would say is like, yeah, organizations that are deeply committed to the history and advocacy of queer identity, and find them and talk to them and see what they have. And they may not have moving images, or they can do a call for their community elders, you know, to be able to contribute materials, that kind of thing. I think that would be really impactful.
Yeah, and let's you make a comment, and then we have one last question from Mikael.
Just a quick thing that I believe in the future of the technologies. So even we have only digital file, like really bad from a VHS transfer data, we hope that one day in the future they might have technology that can restore that kind of stuff. So that's why we have to keep it, and we have to keep in mind that we cannot throw anything away, right? So even with a really bad file, but we, you know, in the end, maybe they can restore it and bring back some much better material in future. So I believe that. Yeah.
No, thank you again. I can just second what Arika said. Thank you for this really fantastic panel. But instead of a question, I can just emphasize what was said on the panel, and also May's last comment, that while you demonstrated that between collecting institutions and research institutions, you can actually, nowadays, we can create networks, actually, not only to preserve these films, but also to make sure that we interpret them, that they are accessible, that they can be discussed, and are not again erased from the canon. The same is true, I think, internationally. It's just as an example, in Vienna, we launched a project last year called Visual History of LGBTIQ in Austria, which is the same approach. We work with community organizations, we work with elders of those communities to actually find records that are outside the canon and that are outside the avant-garde canon, because that used to be the place where you could find queer filmmaking. Particularly difficult in my country, because up until the mid-1990s there was a so-called Vereinsverbot. So any basically homosexuality was something that could not be advertised, and gay people were not allowed, or queer people, lesbians, were not allowed to have associations. So everything basically happened in the closet and behind closed doors. So we are looking at this now, again, not erasing it again as this is just private documents, but actually this is documents of invisible publics, to actually make them public again. And I would really, I'd absolutely love a situation where these various projects that exist in the United States and in Asia and in Europe, where we could talk about how further down the road we actually work with these collections. Like, how do you publish online, for instance, without generating opportunities for abuse or victimization? How can we work with metadata that is not only gendered or conscious of gender differences, but are conscious of all of the fine grading of gender identity and all of that? So I think there's great scope, and this is like a great utopian and emancipative potential that you're shown on this panel, that we can all work together and improve this transnationally. So kudos to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's our time. We'll see you at lunch.